If you're a landlord in the UK, this changes everything. Not in the dramatic, headline-grabbing way the media likes to shout about, not in the way campaign groups promised, and not in the way most landlords think either. What's happening right now in the UK property market isn't loud, it isn't sudden, it doesn't look like a crash. It's quieter than that, slower, more deliberate. And that's exactly why so many people are missing it. 2 years ago, the Renters' Reform Bill was introduced with fanfare. It was sold as a moral reset, a long overdue correction, an end to insecurity for renters, and an overdue reckoning for landlords. Fast forward to now, and the reality looks very different. Because laws don't change markets, behaviour does. And the behaviour of landlords, lenders, tenants, courts and investors has already shifted long before most people realised the rules had truly changed. And if understanding these shifts before the headlines matters to you, that's exactly what we focus on here at UK Property Report. You don't need to do anything right now, just know you're in the right place if clarity like this is useful. This video isn't about what the bill says on paper, it's about what it's actually doing to the UK property market right now, who's winning, who's losing, and why the next phase of this market will reward only a very specific type of investor. If you stay until the end, you'll understand something most people still don't, and it will change how you think about UK property investing from this point forward. 2 years ago, abolishing so-called no-fault evictions sounded simple. End Section 21, give tenants more security, force landlords to justify repossession. But what almost nobody talked about back then was the quiet structural change hidden underneath, the end of fixed-term tenancies as the default. Today, new tenancies are effectively rolling from day one, month to month, open-ended, with tenants able to leave on 2 months' notice at any time, even immediately. That single change rewires the entire risk profile of being a landlord. Previously, certainty came from time, a 6-month term, a 12-month term, predictable cash flow, predictable void planning, predictable refinancing. Now, certainty comes only from behaviour, and behaviour is far harder to model. Landlords can still regain possession, but only for specific reasons: rent arrears, antisocial behaviour, selling the property, moving in themselves or a close family member. And here's where the theory and reality part ways. On paper, this looks balanced. In practice, every one of those routes runs through the courts, and the UK court system is still severely backlogged. Even with digitisation promises, possession claims routinely take many months, in some regions over a year. That delay is the real cost of this reform, and it doesn't show up in government press releases.
Landlords didn't use no-fault evictions because they enjoyed them. They used them because they worked. Remove the shortcut and behaviour adapts. That's why since the bill's progress became inevitable, we've seen a surge in preemptive actions. Tenancies not renewed, rent increases issued earlier, tenant selection becoming more aggressive. Not because landlords are evil, but because uncertainty always gets priced in. This is basic market psychology. When risk increases, prices rise or supply falls, usually both. And that's exactly what's happened. Despite repeated claims that rent controls and eviction reform would stabilise rents, the UK rental market has continued to tighten. Listings are down significantly compared to pre-pandemic norms. Tenant demand remains structurally high due to population growth, delayed home ownership and migration. At the same time, landlord exits are real. Higher interest rates have already crushed marginal yields. UK mortgage rates that once sat comfortably below 2% surged above 5%, and while they've eased slightly, they remain historically restrictive relative to rental yields. For leveraged landlords who bought between 2016 and 2021, refinancing has been a shock. Combine that with reduced flexibility, higher compliance costs, licensing schemes, energy efficiency requirements, and now mandatory ombudsman participation, and many landlords have simply decided it's not worth it. When landlords sell, those homes don't disappear, but they do leave the rental pool. Some are bought by owner-occupiers, some by cash-rich investors, some sit empty during prolonged sales. Net result, fewer rental properties chasing the same number of tenants. This is the part mainstream media rarely explains. Tenant protection laws don't automatically help tenants if supply shrinks faster than protection increases. Security without availability becomes competition, and competition favours the strongest applicants. That's why renters today are facing stricter referencing, higher income multiples, longer decision times, and far less negotiation power, even as protections technically improve.
Now let's talk about rent increases, because this is where misunderstandings is everywhere. Rents can now only be increased once per year with formal notice. Tenants can challenge increases they believe exceed market rates via tribunal. On the surface, this looks like a cap. In reality, it's a timing mechanism. Landlords are responding by front-loading increases, pricing in risk earlier, adjusting rent to the maximum defensible level at review, not gradually. And tribunals don't set rents based on affordability, they set them based on market evidence. So if the market is already high, the increase stands. The hidden consequence here is psychological. Landlords are no longer incentivized to nurture long tenancies through moderation. They're incentivized to reset rent to market whenever legally allowed, because future increases are uncertain. Again, behaviour adapts. Then there's arrears. Yes, persistent arrears grounds have been clarified, but mandatory possession still requires strict thresholds and time. If a tenant simply can't afford a legitimate rent increase, the process to resolve that remains slow. That risk sits squarely with the landlord. Which leads to the next quiet shift, risk selection. Landlords aren't becoming more selective because they want to, they're becoming more selective because they have to. Stable employment, higher incomes, cleaner histories, lower perceived risk. That leaves vulnerable tenants squeezed, not protected. Now layer in the new ombudsman scheme. Every landlord must join. Landlords pay, tenants don't. The ombudsman can order compensation, remedial action, and apologies. Again, conceptually reasonable. But practically, it adds another cost centre with asymmetric accountability. There's still no equivalent redress for landlords dealing with damage, non-cooperation, or drawn-out possession. And yes, there's now a national landlord database. Transparency sounds good, but databases don't just record bad actors, they create friction. Friction slows listings, slows onboarding, increases compliance anxiety. Each individual change is manageable. Together, they reshape incentives. Now let's talk about pets, because this reveals something deeper. Landlords can no longer unreasonably refuse pets. Insurance can be required. Definitions are broad. This isn't about animals. It's about control. Every small loss of discretion chips away at how landlords manage risk, and when control erodes, prices rise or supply falls. Always. So what does all this mean for the UK housing market as a whole? It means we're not heading for a dramatic UK housing crash driven by forced selling alone. We're heading for a bifurcation. Bad assets will suffer, good assets will outperform. Landlords who relied on thin margins, heavy leverage, and regulatory shortcuts are already exiting. Landlords with strong fundamentals, low leverage, professional systems, and long-term horizons are consolidating. This is a transfer, not a collapse. For investors asking, is now a good time to buy property in the UK, the answer isn't yes or no. It's only if you understand the new rules of the game. Yield matters more than appreciation. Cash flow matters more than leverage. Tenant quality matters more than speed. Location selection is tightening. Stock selection is critical. Regulatory resilience is now part of due diligence. The winners will be boring, disciplined, patient. The losers will chase yesterday's strategies in tomorrow's market. And here's the final reality check. Most people still think this reform was about renters versus landlords. It wasn't. It was about shifting responsibility from the state to the private sector without fixing the courts, without building enough homes, and without addressing structural demand. That cost doesn't disappear. It gets redistributed. And the market is still deciding who pays it. If you're a landlord, this doesn't mean panic. It means professionalism. If you're an investor, this doesn't mean avoid UK property. It means evolve. And if you're a renter, it means understanding that protection and access are not the same thing, and never have been. This is not the end of the UK property market. It's the end of the old one. The next phase will belong to those who understand incentives, psychology, and timing, not headlines. And if you want to stay ahead of what's coming next, not after it's already priced in, that's why UK Property Report exists. Not to scare you, not to sell you hype, but to help you think clearly in a market that punishes those who don't. Because in this market, clarity is leverage. And now, at least, you have it.